In this video, I'll be taking you through how to customize the transmittal to suit your own company standards. We'll begin by going into settings, and if we have a look at the transmittal settings section, we can control the naming rule for the transmittal. Preferred naming rules are more information about controlling that. We then need to specify the transmittal type. Acceptable transmittal types are historical transmittal, a single transmittal, or per issue, or a Microsoft Word transmittal. For the purpose of this video, we'll be going through the historical and the single transmittal. Both of these ones use the report designer, which is built into Xrev Transmit. We'll start with our historical transmittal. The template section here is dependent on what type you have selected up here. So if I was to select Microsoft Word, you'll see it changes to where the template file can be found. If it's historic, then it's using, I can only use historical transmittals, and if it's single, I can only use single transmittals. I cannot create a historic transmittal and then change it to a single transmittal. So we'll start by looking at the historical transmittal. Here you can see the template that's currently selected. If I select change, it gives me a list of all the matrix style transmittals that I currently have in my database. If I choose select, then that's the one it will use. I can choose to create a new transmittal. When I create a new one, I can choose to use the default Xrev Transmit template on A4 paper or on letter paper, or it can start with a completely blank document. Until you're familiar with the layout, I would recommend that you use ours and modify it as opposed to attempting to start from scratch. However, if it is quite different to ours, then it may make more sense to start from scratch. Let's have a look at the one we currently have set up. So by selecting edit, it opens up the report designer. And here we can see our report open here. Going through the user interface, we have the ribbon across the top. We can look at print previews or HTML views. We can save, export, we can control fonts, undo, redo, copy, paste, control alignment and layout of cells, zoom in and out, control the view, and apply scripts. Over on our left hand side, we have the toolbox. This is how you actually place components, for example, placing a table, placing an image, putting text labels in, putting page info parameters for things like the date, the number of pages, all that sort of stuff. We then have the Report Explorer, which is basically a document tree of all the different components that go into this particular document and what it makes up. We have, if we hit the other tab, we can see the fields that Xrev Transmit allows you to put into your transmittal. So we have all our documents fields, our issues fields, our project fields, and our recipient fields. And then down here, it's basically similar to the instance properties of Revit, where based on what element we've currently got selected, we can view all the properties of that and modify them. So at the moment, I have the entire report selected. And in here you can see I can control things like the background of the report, the borders, the fonts, the measurement units. Now, I will go into a little bit more detail with the measurement units. If you're copying an Excel template that you already have, then it may make sense to actually switch this to pixels, because a lot of the units that are in Excel are in pixels. Or if you're copying from Word, then you may be using inch or millimeters. So in which case it makes life a little bit easier if you've got the same units. If you're copying from something that's printed, then yeah, measurement units might be millimeters or inches. And then we've got our main document window. Now, it's broken into a number of different sections. So a report is made up of different parts. So here we've got a report header. And in that report header, you can see there's only one report header per report. So in this case, I've got the title, the logo, and a bit of information about the project. We then have the body. And in the body of the report, I've got sub-reports. I have a date of issue. I've got my distribution list. And in my distribution list, for example, it has a title. It then has a header, a group header. And a group header repeats per page. If I didn't want to repeat that per page, then I just put it in the body. And then I've got the body. Similar for reasons for issue. In this case, it only goes on one page. It's never going to, it's always just going to be a single line in my document, so it doesn't really need the structure of a title and a header and a footer. Whereas the distribution list could get quite long, so it may actually spill out to the next page, in which case it makes sense to have a header and a body. We then got our document format size, our method of issue, and then our documents. And similar for documents, we've got documentation list, the header, then the body, and then we've got a footer on the page, bottom of every page. To add extra sections, you can right-click and choose Insert Band. So we can insert detail reports, or we can insert bands. So generally, if you're inserting a band, you'll make it unbound. Sorry, a detail report. And then with that detail report, you basically have a body. But then I could choose to insert a header. And that header would be, like I said here, the header row of the document. I may put in a report header, which is basically the title. So report header is the title, group header is the general header per page, or per, as the report spills out onto additional pages, and the details the body. If we need to move things up and down, we can do that a number of ways. When I hover over a different section, you can see I get this little button here. I can choose that, and then I can choose Edit and Reorder Bands. Or I could go up to this button here and do the same thing, Edit and Reorder Bands. So then I could select a particular section and just move it up and down. Or I can remove it completely. The actual size here is relevant. So you can see here there is a small gap underneath this section, and that gap will actually be placed. So if I look at my print preview, you can see there's a gap before it starts the date of issue section. If I go through and increase that gap, you can see the gap increases. I can't make it smaller, so you can see it will always, at minimum, be the length of its contents, or the height of its contents. If I want to go through and say, let's change this bottom field to address, I can double click in there and change that to address. And then this here is actually a parameter. You can see these little cylinders, orange cylinders, indicate that cell has been bound to a particular field. So if I wanted that to now be project address, rather than going in here and changing all this stuff, which could probably be quite confusing, we just go into field list, find address, and drag and drop. And now that's bound to the new field. Very easy to do. If I want to insert a table, so let's say I want to recreate this table up here. I could just go and copy and paste it, but just to show you how to do it from scratch, I can place a table, draw the table that I want. It'll insert 3 cells by default. We then go through and put in as many cells as we want by inserting columns. Get it out to the right width. When we are specifying widths of columns, it's always best to start at the left-hand side and work your way across. So you get your leftmost column right first. You'll see things do snap into alignment with each other, which can be very useful. And we can do it that way, or we could go through and control click to select multiple columns, and then we can go down to the properties down here and actually specify the width. So if I want all these to be 50 wide, I can very easily do that and be a bit more accurate. Okay, you saw before there was validation, so if I'm actually spilling out into the printer margins, it'll display red to indicate that there's a warning. And then if I then want to drag a field onto there, again it's just, if I want that to be date day, I just drag and drop. Okay, it's very easy to bind parameters, particular sections. If I want to insert an image, we simply place a picture box. We can then go and find the image that we want. And it's placed. Then you've got control over the sizing. So is it going to stretch the image? Is it going to auto size? Is it going to center it, zoom, or squeeze? We can control things like the borders, the fonts. So I could select all the header row there, for example, and go through and specify what fonts for that. I would generally suggest though that what you would do is for the bulk of for the table, specify the defaults, and then only override special cells that need to be different, rather than having to go through and define every single cell. For things like the columns and repeating rows, you can see only the first row column needs to be bound. Behind the scenes, Xrev Transmit knows to start stacking the rest of them out to the width of the page. One tricky bit is with the distribution list and document section, you need to ensure that the data member is set to the appropriate section. So in here, this one's set to recipients, and for the documentation, it's set to documents. That's only the reports that actually need to repeat rows. For example, you could have any number of documents and you could have any number of recipients. Other than that, you can go through, you can control shading of rows, for example, so the background of individual cells and rows. So we have foreground color, which in case would be the font color, and the background color, which is actual cell background. In this case, sorry, that's the border color. In which case the background here is transparent. If I wanted this date field to be in a particular table, for example, so maybe I have an extra date row here, so let's insert a row below, and this is going to be the date. I can then put a page info field in there and just drag it out to the same width. And then specify what page information do I want. Current date and time. And we can control the formatting as well. So let's say we want day, month, year. You can see the actual syntax that is used. So we've just got the curly brackets either side, 0 colon, and then the actual format of the date. Once you're happy with how it's laid out, simply hit save or save as if you're making changes and have multiple versions that you want to try. And then select it. So I'm not going to change it, save any of my changes, but then select it, and that becomes your template. Looking at some of the parameters, there are parameters in here that aren't used in our template by default. So you can do a bit more than what we're actually showing you in our sample. So for the documents, we can put in the scale on the page. We could have the paper size down against each sheet. For the issues, we can have the date in different ways. So just the day, just the month, just the time, the year. A document count field. So say for all our documents that get issued in a particular revision, we could have a cell at the bottom of that column. It tells you exactly how many documents got issued in that revision or on that particular date. We have obviously the formats, issued by, methods, name, and paper sizes and reasons. For the project, we have address, client name, number, and status. And for the recipients, we have company name, first name, full name, last name, and number of copies. And with the documents, we also have current revision. So if you have a column which just gives you a summary of the most current revision that has been issued for each particular document, then you can do that by using that field there. So in which case, if I wanted that to be before all the revisions, I just wanted to have the current revision, then I could go through and put in an extra column in here and bind that by simply dragging and dropping it onto the field. So insert column to the right. So say this is my current revision column. I can just drag and drop my current revision there. See my vertical alignment's a bit out, so I may want to fix that up. So we've got lots of different options for our alignment. I'm just going to go center. Okay, and now we have a current column, and you may want to put a header title for that to say that it's the current revision. Looking at the per issue designer. Actually, before we do that, let's have a look at another sample just to show you how much you can customize it, because you can pretty much achieve anything in terms of layouts. So here's another one that's really quite different. If we have a look at the print preview, you can see it's completely different. Own company's logo. Yeah, so that's that one. Now looking at a per issue one, so we'd switch to single and now go to change. You can see we've got a different option, so the templates now that are showing are only the per issue ones, We choose edit. And you can see it's got a totally different layout to it, but all the same structure and things apply. We do have slightly different fields applicable to these types of documents, so name, number, revision, scale and size. We've got control over all the issues, all the project parameters and the recipient parameters. So yeah, it works exactly the same way. So it depends on which version you produce, whether you produce per issue style transmittals or full history or all the history documents for previous issues. And hopefully with that you can produce your transmittal. If you do have any problems, just contact us and we'll try and help.